Right now, the question over whether Nicolás Maduro's transfer to the United States, his arrest and forcible transfer to the United States, whether it was legal or not, is going to be one of the more complex legal questions that any court, certainly in the United States, has faced in a long time. Because the simple answer is unknown. And it really depends on who you're asking. I think a lot of what we're seeing right now in the media is portraying this as a violation of international law. And frankly, it probably is a violation of international law. There is no law that says just because somebody has an arrest warrant or just because a grand jury has reached an indictment that you can go into another nation and forcibly remove or essentially abduct any citizen, whether it be a head of state or not. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. There is extradition. This is clearly not a case of extradition. Nobody reached out to Venezuela from the Department of Justice or our government and said, do we have permission under an extradition treaty to remove him with your cooperation? Will you send him to us? That obviously did not happen here, as the country doesn't recognize a legitimate government in place. So there's no one to negotiate an extradition with. The country went in and forcibly removed him. And I think the question that, at least as a criminal defense practitioner in the federal courts in the United States, is really most pertinent is that what effect does it actually have on his case here in the United States? And the answer is very little to possibly none. And that's a big challenge. There is precedent in our country from the Supreme Court and from previous cases that says whether or not somebody's arrest is lawful, if it's based on probable cause and the person has made it to the United States and they're appearing before a United States court, the manner of the arrest, the forcefulness of the arrest is actually not a basis for dismissal. And the court really doesn't even consider it. There is precedent on that. And I believe that's going to be the precedent that the Department of Justice and the Trump administration has certainly well researched and is well versed in before making this decision. The forcefulness, the legality of the arrest is actually not such an important question when it comes to can the court proceed with a prosecution that was based on a valid grand jury indictment. So, was it legal under international law? Was it a violation of state sovereignty and UN charters? Probably was. What effect does that have on whether he can still be prosecuted, convicted, sent to prison? Quite frankly, it's probably going to be none based on precedent in this country. At the outset of this case, and his lawyers have already made clear that they are planning a lot of motions. And those motions that we know are going to come, I mean, they haven't been filed yet, but there is a pattern here. There is a playbook that was really set forth in the prosecution of Manuel Noriega, the former de facto leader, warlord, so to speak, of Panama in the late 80s. And that playbook on the defense side is the individual is a head of state, therefore they have head of state immunity. Regardless of the legality of the arrest in the sense of did it violate sovereignty of Venezuela? Did it violate treaties, UN charters? The courts in the United States are governed by US domestic law. However, our courts absolutely recognize within United States law that legitimate heads of state do have immunity. Now, it is without question that the government's position here is going to be that Maduro was not the legitimate head of state. They have taken that position for years. They took that position prior to his 2020 indictment. They've certainly taken that position regularly and very vocally in the lead up to this arrest and to this grand jury indictment. They have put a $50 million bounty on his head. The United States is not putting $50 million bounties on other presidents if they believe it's the legitimate president or the legitimate ruler of that country. However, the defense is undoubtedly going to argue that he was the legitimate head of state, regardless of the results. They're going to have to somehow find a way around the results of this 2024 election where he was outvoted by a substantial amount. But they're going to say, regardless, he is the legitimate head of state. He has immunity for that. After the immunity question is resolved, and if it's resolved in favor of Maduro, case goes away, head of state immunity. The next challenge, probably after immunity or at the same time, is, does the United States have personal jurisdiction, irrelevant of how the arrest, how they forcibly brought him to this country? Do they have jurisdiction to prosecute him for the acts that are charged in the indictment? Now, they have made very clear, the indictment makes very clear, our government has made very clear that these are prosecutions for narco terrorism, drug trafficking acts using firearms in a conspiracy against the United States. These aren't charges related to how he ruled his country or even really corruption. The indictment does have allegations of corruption, and the word is used, but they have carefully crafted this indictment to make it very much this is a drug trafficker. This is someone who is leading a drug trafficking organization. We are treating him just like we treated El Chapo or other drug traffickers. And so we're going to proceed along that theory. There is no immunity for even a head of state who is committing criminal acts. So the defense team will likely file a motion saying that his decisions were acts, were the legitimate acts, or even if they are condemned, were the acts of head of state. But there is a lot of precedent to say that that argument is not likely to survive, because it's going to be difficult to say that any sort of allegation regarding drugs and the dealing of drugs or the facilitation of drugs moving across borders is going to be considered a legitimate act, or even just an act within the powers of a foreign actor, which could bring him also sovereign immunity. I expect both of those arguments to fail. So, as far as how this case is going to unfold procedurally, we're going to start, and it could be years of litigation. Now, there is a court date set for March 17th now, but could be extensive litigation just regarding whether or not this prosecution can proceed in the first place. And these are going to be the motions related to sovereignty, related to the arrest. I'm sure there are going to be arguments regarding violations of international law, sovereignty, whether these were official acts, head of state immunity. All of those are going to occur first. And of course, if the defense is successful on some or all of those motions, there is a high likelihood that the prosecution won't proceed. Now, given our precedent and given United States law and how we've treated similar cases in the past, we expect those arguments are going to fail, especially following the precedent of Manuel Noriega, which is the most comparable case that's happened in our country. So once these jurisdictional sovereignty immunity questions, if they are to be denied as far as how the defense motions in support of those claims, then we're going to proceed into the actual evidentiary or discovery phase of the case. And that's also going to take quite a bit of time, because undoubtedly this case is going to involve confidential documents, which there is a separate process for in any case that often involves foreign officials or even cases that have been brought against officials within our country. There are confidential documents that are involved, government documents, foreign intelligence that was gathered as part of this investigation. And it takes a long time for the court to review those documents and decide what can be released to the defense and when and on what timetable, and also what can be released to the public. So, in any of these cases involving government actors, whether it's within our own country, our own politicians, or from a foreign state, that aspect of confidential documents really makes these cases take a long time. So, I do expect that it's going to be quite some time before we actually start seeing defenses raised about the meat of this indictment, which is, was he a conspirator to a very large scale narco terrorism, drug trafficking organization, or wasn't he?